Hi, my name is Kristel Swayze. I am a lifelong resident of Cabarrus County. I grew up and went to school at Shady Brook Elementary School, Kannapolis Middle School, and graduated from A.L. Brown in 1993. Following my graduation from A.L. Brown, I pursued my further education at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, with a degree in sociology with a minor in history. And you might note that with a sociology and history degree, unless you're going on to social work or to be a history teacher, that you pretty much can't get a job necessarily right out of college. But thankfully, I was able to get hired by Blue Cross Blue Shield out of Durham at the time. And sadly, it comes back to insurance and the things we're facing today. I had the opportunity in 1997 to really get to the heart of matters with people with their healthcare needs. We were in the independent policy. So, we would have a young lady out of, the East Coast. She owns her own, beauty salon, and then she wouldn't have things covered because it was a pre-existing condition. So, at that point in time, I really saw how people in their lives are impacted by healthcare and the lack of there. So not long after that, I started looking for a career that didn't make me want to go and leave and cry and go home. And thankfully, I was hired by a local printing company who was willing to give me, as a young 20-some-year-old, a shot. And thankfully for them, now, 20-some years later, almost 28 years later, I'm now my own business owner. Back in 2002, I started KS Image Solutions after getting experience with the other previous company. So that, it's given me an opportunity to work for the clients that I want, to support the clients I work with. I work a lot with healthcare. I work with a lot of government agencies and see the things that they go in through day in and day out. So I think those experiences through life have given me a good heads up on how to be a better leader, how to look for answers for people who have needs, and to look out for and protect our residents and our employees.
Thank you. What's one thing that you'd like to accomplish in your first 6 months in office?
Well, there are many things, but um, there's been a very large politically charged arena here in Cabarrus County with the Commissioner's Office over the last year, and it has deeply impacted our employees' morale. I think as a good leader, we need to be transparent, and we also need to lead and make sure that our 1,300 to 1,400 employees also know that they are valued and appreciated. With frivolous lawsuits and things like that that have gone on, it's made them feel like their jobs are, maybe the next on the cutting block, or being questioned about their health care and things like that. So for me personally, one of those biggest things is making sure that our employees feel appreciated, and that so when we have snow day weekends like this, that they're out cleaning the buildings and making sure our first responders are on the road, that they're going home at night and saying, hey, we are appreciated and valued.
How would you use the county's role to support workforce participation and quality of life for Cabarrus County residents?
Well, as a lifelong resident of Cabarrus County, I turned 50 this past year, and I've seen a lot go on here in Cabarrus County. And sadly, one of those times was in 2003 and 2009 when we lost Pilatex and Philip Morris. Growing up in Kannapolis, most of my classmates' families worked in the mills. And so when those mills shut down, their families didn't have jobs. They couldn't put food on the table. Some of them lost their homes. And one of the greatest things that came out of that for Cabarrus County was the development between Rowan Cabarrus, our Chamber of Commerce, our EDC, our county governments, and municipalities. They all jumped in to make sure that our residents were going to be taken care of. They worked with Rowan Cabarrus. They made sure that, these employees could reinvent themselves. But the sad part was there were no other jobs for them to go. When you lose 6,000 jobs in 6 years, where are those employees supposed to go? And so for me, there's questions about economic incentives and how we're supporting corporations, but not supporting other agencies, companies here. If a company is going out and coming to Cabarrus County or wanting to grow in Cabarrus County and provide jobs, food on the table, and have to go by certain criteria. We don't give away incentives just to anyone. You have to meet certain protocol. You have to bring this many jobs. They have to have this much of a salary. And if you don't meet those criteria, then you don't get an incentive. So, for example, there was sadly one of the complexes right up the road. They have pulled out in the last couple of weeks and months, and people have questioned, why did they get an incentive? Well, they didn't get an incentive yet. That incentive is only given when you meet your certain criteria, when you're giving back to Cabarrus County, when you're bringing your tax dollars to Cabarrus County. And with that, you know, it's not money that was ever going to be on the table in the first place. For example, the Eli Lilly property, that was slated to be 4,000 homes, and the water and sewer could not be ran out there. If they had put 4,000 homes there, that would have been, building a new elementary school, building a new middle school, building a new high school, the infrastructure needs, building the roads, building, having to supply more sheriff's departments, police departments. And so with Eli Lilly, you know, that land was just land. Now, I think last year when I looked at it, I think it was maybe $7 million of property tax that they've brought into Cabarrus County, and they're not even done yet. And with that, they've not hadn't at the last time I looked at it, they hadn't hit their incentive markers, because they're still growing, they're still doing certain things. And at this point, they may have started that incentive, but that's a 10-year process. That is money we would have never seen in Cabarrus County. We may be giving them an 85% discount, but we're still making the 15%. And then in the long run, we're going to have 100%. And that is going to save the taxpayers of Cabarrus County. So, every time a homeowner moves here, that is it's a drain on our community. We're having to build schools, we're having to produce things that, schools, sheriff, what roads. And with the Eli Lilly projects, those are going to help offset some of those things in our community. And I'm strongly for those. I'm not going to say we're going to give incentives to everybody, but if it's going to be things that are worthwhile, absolutely. I'm going to be 100% for it. Furthermore, with the incentives, the general public doesn't always see the incentives that are brought. The county commissioners and the EDC, they're shutting those things down before they're evaluating. They're saying, yeah, this is one we may want to look at, and this may be one we don't want to look at. So I think we're doing a very good job with the EDC, the chamber, the local county governments, between the county and municipalities, in evaluating and seeing, is it something we want to continue to look at, or is it something that's not going to be beneficial to the taxpayers of Cabarrus County?
Thank you. Cabarrus County includes both fast-growing communities and areas facing economic challenges. How would you guide county policy and investment decisions to support balanced growth and opportunity across the entire county?
First of all, we have 5 very unique municipalities. I grew up in Kannapolis. I live in Concord now. Mount Pleasant's completely different from Midland and Harrisburg. So the first thing that we need to do is work with our local municipalities. We aren't there on the dais making decisions all on our own. It is our job to work with and support the municipalities. It's kind of like with the school systems. The school systems, the municipalities are the ones who approve the homes. The school systems are the ones who are required to provide the education, and it's the county's job to provide the funding for those. So it is a collaborative effort that we all need to work together on, because I don't need to be making decisions for Midland. Midland needs to be making decisions for Midland, but how can the counties help support Midland, Mount Pleasant, Harrisburg, Kannapolis, and Concord?
And how would you approach county-level policies and investments to ensure Cabarrus County remains competitive in attracting and retaining businesses while managing growth responsibly?
So I remember the times back in 2012, 13, and 14 where Cabarrus County was shut down for business. It was literally posted, on the business magazine throughout our region. With one decision, there was a shutdown when they voted against wind shear. They were already a business here. They were going to bring more business here, and they were going to grow here. And it wasn't a huge incentive, but it was an incentive. But those commissioners at that time said no. And for a very long time, Cabarrus County was looked at and said no. I feel like Cabarrus County, in a responsible, growth-minded mindset, needs to say yes to help, because our community deserves to have jobs and be able to work in Cabarrus County and not have to go to Charlotte or surrounding areas.
How would you consider the impact of county decisions on the business community?
Well, it is, as a business owner of 20 some years, The county government, when they say no to other businesses, they're also saying no to us because those businesses help bring us clients. They go to our restaurants and they also go, buy homes here.